Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Candace. Welcome to WTF.
Women Talk Finance.
Our WTF podcast will take a simplified approach to finance, and we talk about investing, a topic we believe women don't talk enough about.
We'll discuss common financial questions and challenges that women face in business and throughout their personal lives. I'd like to give a quick disclosure before we begin our conversation. This overview is for informational purposes only. We might include some projections, and those should not be relied upon for the purpose of investing. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and any investments we mention are meant for accredited investors only. And any offer can only be considered upon review of a prospectus and relevant offering documentation. So please keep this in mind as we move through this overview, and remember that these are our opinions only. Today's guest is Wynne Reece. She is an attorney, an experienced entrepreneur, as well as a philanthropist with a fantastic story. I'm going to read a quote here from an article that was written about her. "It all made perfect sense," Wynne recalls. "No matter how strenuous my parents' careers were, whether with a legal case that lasted 7 years or writing a symphony, the one consistency I always saw was the importance of taking care of others. I grew up understanding that everybody was equally valuable, no matter their life circumstances. I carried that with me into my legal career. That intentionality and experience led to the formation of the Creatives Counsel and to Reece Law." Welcome, Wynne. Let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us what the Creatives Counsel is, tell us what it does, and how this background with your parents kind of led you to creating the Creatives Counsel.
Well, first of all, thank you both for having me here today. It is a true honor. I'm so proud of everything that you guys are doing as well, and inspired. My gosh, the previous episodes have been enlightening beyond words. So thank you for that. With the Creatives Counsel, it is an arm of Reece Law, so it's a kind of a sub-brand if we're speaking to those other entrepreneurs out there. And it was built with the client in mind. It was built to kind of answer a question that was persistently out there about the legal profession. How do you make it accessible? How do you make it something that people want to pay attention to, especially the creative business owners, especially the dreamers out there? They don't want to focus on the logistical, ugly parts of running a business, but you have to. And so that was kind of the mission behind the Creatives Counsel, is how do we rectify that?
So talk to us a little bit more about the Creatives Counsel, because you grew up in this world of having both a creative and the legal mindset in the same household, right? So your mom is a Grammy-winning classical composer. That's incredible. I mean,
it is.
And then your father is also an attorney. I mean, what an amazing way to grow up. Is that what inspired this creation of the Creatives Counsel? You kind of had the best of both worlds in the same house.
I think it is in large part attributable to that. I'll often reference our house as being like kind of a war of the worlds, because you've got total left brain, total right brain, and they really are that in life too, in how they approach everything. And so there was never a day where there was not loads of creativity in our house. My mom playing the piano, them encouraging me to paint, go outside, explore. But also, there was never a time, especially once I was of age to write, so what is that, first grade maybe, when it wasn't about editing, 7 rounds of editing, making it perfect. It's never perfect. It's good enough. So that was kind of embedded in me from a very young age. And both of them, which I also think plays heavily into the Creatives Counsel, both of them really came from not much and started their own businesses in a sense. Not to say that when they were younger, their families weren't fine. They were. But when they were married, when they were together at a young age, they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and they kind of set out to pioneer their own careers. It's always been that way. So my mom, obviously, business owner, because you're a composer, you work for yourself. And my dad was always, really from early in his career, he joined force with 2 other attorneys when they went and started a different firm. And so kind of started from the ground up. So I always saw what it was like to work theoretically for yourself. And I think that the fear, the financial fear that so many have around starting a business and operating a business, well, I recognized it. It was just weighted differently because I also saw the freedom that came with running your own business in some capacity. And I understand why so many people want that, and was hoping that through the Creatives Counsel, we would be able to create a platform that would help more people do that, and comfortably so.
With the Creatives Counsel is you give not only legal advice to creatives, so you're combining those two worlds right there already, but growing up, it sounds like you had this creative mother, and this kind of logical right brain father. Growing up, did you know that you were going to be an entrepreneur and that you blended those two spheres so naturally? Or kind of when did that click for you? And when did you recognize, wow, I'm uniquely positioned to offer this to others out there that kind of need to bridge that gap between the creative world and something that's so logical like law?
I'm laughing internally because I absolutely did not know that until well into my legal career. I was dead set against becoming a lawyer. My gosh, I was like, no way, no how. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing what either parent does. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to travel the world, and I'm going to fix cleft palates and do plastic surgery for people in need in other countries.
But you had an event company at the same time.
I did. Well, that was really formed. I always loved throwing a good party, but that was really formed when I was waiting for my bar results, because the bar exam was such a unique experience. I'm not a great test taker, never have been. And during our the first morning of the first day of the bar exam, there was another person taking the bar, sitting a few people down from me, and had a grand mal seizure due to the stress. And it didn't stop for a while. The bar exam kept going for a while. Well, they were seizing. Yeah. And I eventually they stopped and got her the medical attention that she needed. But after that, I was so thrown off that I walked out of the bar thinking, there's a really good chance that I failed that. And if I'm somebody that if the world knows that I failed, I allow myself time to sit in that failure. And I knew I would kind of get into a funk. And so I decided to really turn the event planning into a backup business and form it in the 3 months while I was waiting for my bar results, and book a bunch of events. And then I did pass. But then I had a bunch of events to do, so simultaneously ran the firm and the event planning business for a few years.
I think this goes to a deeper theme here, in that you talked about you initially wanted to be a doctor and fix specifically cleft palates and help people in that way. It kind of spun off into, now you're helping creatives. You're almost like giving back to your roots of this situation you had of opposites attract, right? You've just taken what you had in your household of providing that kind of structure to creatives, but on this much larger scale. Where did this rooted taking care of others and giving back, where did that philosophy come from? And how did you realize that could actually be something that you could blend these wonderful different sides of yourself and turn into a business?
That's a really good question. I don't know when it became a part of me. I would imagine from a very, very young age. It was something that my parents always, kind of preached in the house, in a sense. The taking care of others, being human is to take care of others, doing good. In the last few years, obviously, there's been so much strife in the world. And my dad's response will be like, if your heart's not hurting, then something's probably wrong with you. Your heart needs to be hurting for what's going on in the world. And there's only so much that we can do, but we need to do that. So I think that comes just from teachings from a very young age. The actual kind of challenge to incorporate it into my professional career was an answer to a challenge that my dad posed. And that was, I will leave big firm life, leave the salary behind. He had an incredible career, and I will mentor you with Reece Law if you will find an underserved area that we can practice in. So it was really kind of a motivating factor from the get-go of like, if we can do good, if you can identify that and we can do good, then I'll give up everything I've got and I'll mentor you to be the best lawyer that you can be, the best lawyer out there, but we have to be doing good while we take that on.
When you were talking about taking the bar and then having the event company kind of as a backup plan, you mentioned something that I find very striking. And you said you would sit in that failure. That to me is a scary, scary, scary place. I don't want to do it. I don't want to sit in failure. I don't want to acknowledge it. I don't like it. It is scary. Can you talk about whether that came from something in your childhood, whether that's just your character? How did you get a comfort level around that? And even as you sit here, to be able to just so casually say, like, I sat in my failure. I acknowledge that and am so impressed by that. And I want like a teaspoon of that myself. Just a teaspoon, like a tiny bit.
I think it does also come from my parents. I went to private school growing up. It was always about academics, success. I played 4 sports. I was, everything was competition driven. But the message from my parents was always, do what's going to make you happy. And if you do fail something, that's fine. Learn from it. And I actually said that. I gave a commencement speech at my high school a few years ago, and I said to this auditorium of students, I hope when you go to college you have the opportunity to fail, and that you fail big and hard, and that you learn from it. And all the parents said, like, get her off the stage. But I think that you learn so much from failing. Not just about why that didn't go well. You learn so much about yourself and about how you can handle different situations, how you process them, how you interact with and uplift others, even in that time of strife, that all plays into making you a better version of yourself, personally and professionally. That to not sit in it and acknowledge it is really doing yourself a disservice.
Every day you hear about people making money by investing in IPOs and startups. But what about you? These kinds of investments are simply not available to Main Street investors. At Roe Capital Group, we are committed to providing access to strategic, early-stage, primarily low-market correlated investment opportunities. Accredited investors go to roecapitalgroup.com for more information. Roe Capital Group, empowering your financial journey.
Let's stick with this theme of failure. I love what both you and Candace have said about how you embrace it. And Candace, I think you said it reflects growth, right? And Wynne, you said you stick with it, you stay in it. If there are listeners that are tuned in right now really actively in the midst of a failure, I think there's a mental habit of, beating ourselves up, having trouble shifting our perspective and moving past that. What would you tell a listener if they're in the middle of a failure? How to shift their perspective, how to kind of move on and reorient around the failure to see it as an opportunity for growth?
In the same way about the shifting away from failure and shifting the perspective, it's a larger issue, a larger societal issue, a global issue of the shame that comes with it, of not allowing yourself to feel the failure because you're deflecting and saying, but look at what else is going on in the world. This really isn't that bad because look at all of the other pain. Look at what this person's going through, what this country's going through. And to ignore what you're feeling because you feel some amount of external shame around this idea of, oh, my life isn't that bad. You're then ignoring it, and then it's going to fester and it's going to sit in your mind, and there's chances that you'll grow resentful because everybody deserves to feel the pain of and the dissatisfaction and the anger and the whole slew of emotions that comes with failing. Nobody likes it. It's certainly not an enjoyable feeling, but it's human. It's the only way that we grow. And I think the idea of shifting it is first let yourself feel it. You don't have to shout to the world, oh my gosh, I failed. I didn't meet my goal weight this week, whatever it is. You don't have to shout that to the world because to the world, you might get pushback. You might get internet trolls that say, oh my gosh, well, look at what else is happening. But allow yourself to be in it. Push that shame away. seeing what you can learn from it, and perhaps you in it can't see what you can learn from it, but if you have some trusted advisors, very close friends, people who will be real and raw with you, think about those people who you could do the worst thing in the world and they're going to be mad at you and they're going to call you out on it, but at the end of the day, they're still going to love you because you're human, and humans make mistakes and humans fail. Those are the people who are in that moment going to be able to flesh out with you what it is that they're seeing, and also probably encourage you to remember why you did what you did in the first place, and help you to understand that that's not gone. The why is not gone. It's just a different path.
I'd love to hear your coping mechanism, because you said you love failure and I don't. I go to friends and I'm like, oh, this happened. But it's like almost like, okay, I'll take ownership of it, but almost it happened to me. not like it happened for me or it happened because of me. It happened to me. And if I can just share it and unload it and get like the love from my people, you know, where I still feel loved in spite of it. That's for me a coping mechanism with failure. And then maybe once I'm a little removed from it and I still feel loved and accepted, then I can learn from it. But in that moment, that's the key thing I need. Like, still love me anyway.
I don't love the activity of going through failure. Okay. I love what my life has become because of my biggest failures. I do love that. I met my husband because I royally screwed up. I mean, just absolute slap in the face, shame moment.
Are we going to hear about it?
Not right now. Maybe. Yeah, we could do it another time. I got arrested. I know, right? And I was 17. I had to stay home for the summer. Couldn't go gallivanting around like I wanted to. And I met my husband. I met my person, my human, who is my person I go to. I mean, he is like my champ. He's my champion. He's my hype man. And so I often reflect on that. The other thing I do, and I don't remember who told me this, but somebody told me this, failure shaming starts really young. You get an F, failure. You're a failure. It's why we even started doing these participation awards, right? Because we didn't want our little nuggets to fail, because we want to insulate them from failure because failure is so bad. And so somebody had told me a long time ago to, when I'm in a moment of failure, to go inside and hug little Candace. Give little Candace a hug and tell her it's okay. So be my own person of saying like, you're okay, you're enough. And this is okay, because guess what? You don't even know what the great thing is that's on the other side of this failure. So it sucks. You're going to live in it. You're going to feel it right now. Your stomach is just absolutely turning because this is not fun. But the next great thing in your life is literally like waiting on the other side of that. So I don't know that either of those things really work for anybody else, but they work for me. And I reflect on that moment often, in that one of my first big failures in life led me to one of my greatest things, my person. So I'm grateful to that failure every day.
If you are in the midst of a failure, please feel free to reach out to these 3 people. We will be your hype crew through a failure. Like, yes, you did it. You failed. On to the next thing, right? We'll be that for you.
Absolutely. If you haven't watched Meet the Robinsons, that's a great Disney movie about failure. And it's darling. And they celebrate failure. Every time that they fail, they throw up banners and like cheer. And it's like, yes. And it's a Disney movie and it's darling. But it's hard to be celebratory in a moment of failure. But the whole movie is about celebrating failure.
And moving forward.
Absolutely. How do you, through the Creatives Counsel, mentor, guide creatives through failure? That's a whole new level of, it's one thing to fail yourself, and I think we've all been there, right? And especially if you're entrepreneurial, but how do you mentor people? What would you say to people who are kind of going through this? And maybe who never had the intention of being an entrepreneur themselves. They're creative, and the way for them to be creative is entrepreneurship, which inherently has a lot of failure.
It does. It does indeed. I think that you can kind of define failure, define those obstacles that might equate to failure from somebody's point of view in different ways. So with entrepreneurs, it might turn into, you started a business and it didn't go as well as you thought, or you started a business with a best friend and things went south. Now you don't talk to each other anymore and you're in a battle to see who can get the other one out faster. It might be a trademark application that doesn't get approved after 12 months of trying to get it approved. And all of those are equally incredibly frustrating, especially because all of them take investment, both time and financial investment on the front end to see whether or not you can even get to a point of success. And there's no way to refund that, which is hard, I think, for creatives and for small businesses. But in those moments, I certainly, and I think that Jackie knows this, but my job is very much legal as well as counseling, almost as though a psychologist. Disclaimer, I am not a psychologist. I have no training, no degree. I do not hold myself out to be a psychologist. However, you can't advise somebody as a business owner really well without acknowledging everything that makes them human also. And so giving space and time to that. And sometimes there's not a fix. Sometimes it's just sitting there and acknowledging this really sucks and I'm really sorry. And here are ways that we can keep going forward. That's probably not going to get fixed. That probably has to just be. But how can we move past that? And so it's a lot of granting of space to allow yourself to feel those emotions, but then also figure out how you can move forward.
Your counsel and counselor.
And that's how they introduced you. If you were standing in a courtroom, the judge may address you as counselor. So it is inherently part of the job. And I love how you describe that. Give it space, a strong acknowledgement like, okay, that's messy, but we're going to leave it there. Let's talk about ways to productively move forward. And there's a big acknowledgement of the emotional components that go in because it is a very human process.
I think Jackie and I have Roe Capital Group, and that really was spurred from kind of the same idea of that we're meeting these really great entrepreneurs, many times creatives, and they need capital. And one thing they really can't do is take their focus off of what they're doing creatively or the business that they're growing to go and go into that fund management capital raise side. Because then what it does is it kind of eats away at their creativity. So I think that there's this incredible need in the marketplace for organizations that are serving entrepreneurs, specifically creatives. So how do people find this kind of resource?
That's a wonderful question. And I think that is an area that somebody could tap into. There are a heck of a lot of platforms out there that have lists of people, but no, nothing against people who make lists. But, I think there's an element missing on those kind of lists of here's a bunch of lawyers you could talk to, here's a bunch of CPAs, because a massive component to finding the right professional team is personality. And I tell people all the time, look, like any accountant can crunch numbers. Any lawyer can write a contract, but who do you trust? Who do you feel like you can be yourself with? Who can you divulge everything to? Who can you be vulnerable in front of? And I think that is an area really that is yet to be kind of fleshed out fully, but it is important. And actually, when I was listening to, I think maybe your first episode where you were talking about the idea that people don't, believe that they can invest whatever it is, $100. They don't believe that they can do it. They need to keep it, in their bank account. They need to see the liquidity of it. I heard somebody speak once and say, don't start a business until you've got 1 to 3 years of full operational expenses saved up, liquid in a fund. And it's an unfortunate message to put out there because we're in a time where that kind of savings, unless you have an independent wealth source, it's nearly impossible. Also, because whatever you think your expenditures are going to be, they're going to be more. And so the idea of don't do it until you've got that money, you could spend your lifetime saving up that money, and then you're missing out on the opportunity that could make you tenfold that by being able to take that chance. And so I think that word of mouth is fantastic. I think asking the team of professionals that you have in place who they recommend for other resources is really good. It doesn't hurt to go and look at the lists. I always encourage people, if you're going to do that, dive further into it. Look at if they have any social media, look if you can find any videos of them online. Is there anything where you can get a glimpse of who they are as a person, to really make sure that the team that you're building does have that kind of trust and still level of expertise that you need, that I think, you guys clearly have it at Roe, and we strive to have with Creatives Counsel too.
I mean, we live in this incredibly entrepreneurial time, and it's getting easier and easier to be a creative and be entrepreneurial. There's so many resources that now support that entrepreneurial mindset and allow creatives to really monetize their passion. But I think you've hit it, is that, and that's what you absolutely serve with the Creatives Counsel, is still that the business operations side, the legal side is still a component that needs to be filled in that space. And we're seeing younger and younger generations, these generations coming up, are needing to fill that part of themselves creatively and monetize it. And so I absolutely think you're right. There is 100% a need for that in this marketplace.
Shameless plug. We're going to be back with Wynne for a second episode talking about a recent study of Gen Zers. So the millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. Gen Zs are those born between 97 and 2012. 72% of them, of those Gen Zers, want to start their own company. So we're going to talk about this and carry that through, and really, to Candace's point, talk about the need for those creatives out there. And then with Wynne, talk about how you build that team. How do you approach that? If you are young, you don't want to sit there and wait for your bank account to have the perfect number, right? Because if you wait for the perfect time, you're going to be waiting likely forever. There is no perfect time. Now is the perfect time. So we're going to talk with Wynne about kind of what those next steps are. How can entrepreneurs take control over their lives, choose a purposeful life, and then create their own schedules, create the work-life balance that many people seek. Wynne has talked to us about creating something that you believe in. So come back and we'll talk about that on our next episode. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us. Please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with the WTF Women Talk Finance podcast.
Email us with questions, suggestions, or just say hi at media@roecapitalgroup.com.
Again, thank you for listening to WTF Women Talk Finance podcast.